You've done it again. You're standing directly in front of someone you've met at least 3 times, maybe 4, and their name is just gone. Not hovering at the tip of your tongue, not hiding somewhere in the back of your brain, waiting to be rescued. Just completely, cleanly absent, like it was never stored anywhere in the first place. And you're standing there, smiling, nodding, doing everything right on the outside. While on the inside, absolute panic, because the next 12 seconds of your life are about to become pure improvised theater. You're going to subtly angle your body, hoping someone nearby says their name first. You're going to scan the room for a name tag. You're going to pray their phone rings, or someone interrupts, or honestly at this point that the fire alarm goes off. Anything to avoid saying, "Hey, you." And the worst part? You're smiling through all of it, completely composed on the outside, a total disaster on the inside. We've all been there, but here's the part that nobody talks about. The people who experience this most, the chronic name forgetters, the ones who blank out every single time, they are not careless, not rude, not the self-absorbed type who moves through the world without noticing people. In fact, they are almost always the opposite. And once you understand what's actually happening inside their brain, you will never feel guilty about it the same way again. Let's go back to the exact moment you meet someone new, because something is happening in that moment that most people completely underestimate. Your brain is doing an enormous amount of simultaneous work. It's reading their face, picking up micro-expressions you're not even consciously aware of, registering tone of voice, calculating the social weight of the situation. Who are they? How do they relate to you? Should you be warm or professional, open or guarded? It's figuring out whether they like you and whether you even like them. And underneath all of that, it's also monitoring what you look like while doing all of this, how you're standing, whether you're making the right amount of eye contact, enough to seem engaged. Not so much that you seem intense. Your working memory, the short-term holding space in your prefrontal cortex, is essentially juggling 6 things at once. And into that exact storm of mental activity, someone hands you a single arbitrary sound. Their name. "Hi, I'm Kevin." Kevin. Okay. Kevin. And here is the problem with Kevin. Kevin doesn't mean anything. It doesn't connect to a concept, doesn't trigger an image or a feeling or a memory, doesn't link to anything you already know. It just sits there, completely isolated, floating in a brain that is already overwhelmed and has absolutely no bandwidth left to babysit a random syllable it just met. So your brain does exactly what it always does when it's stretched thin. It decides what matters. And a name, a sound with no emotional weight, no personal history, no attached meaning, is always one of the first things to go. This is not a character flaw. This is not carelessness. This is your brain being exactly as efficient as it was designed to be. In 1987, 2 psychologists named McWeeny and Ellis published a study that quietly changed the way researchers think about memory. They called it the Baker-Baker paradox. And it's one of those findings that sounds almost too simple until you sit with what it actually means. Here's what they did. They showed 2 different groups of people the same photograph, same man, same face. They told one group this man was a baker by profession. They told the other group that this man's surname was Baker. Same word. Completely identical, just framed differently. Days later, they tested both groups. The people who learned it as a profession remembered it far more easily than the people who learned it as a name. Same word, completely different retention. And the reason is actually very intuitive once you feel it. When you hear baker as a job, your brain immediately starts building connections. It thinks of flour, of bread, of early mornings and the smell of something warm in an oven. It pictures the whole world that word belongs to. Baker, the name, activates none of that. It just floats there, rootless, with nothing to attach itself to. And this is the fundamental problem with names. Names are semantically empty. They don't carry meaning the way other words do. They are labels, purely arbitrary labels that someone's parents chose, often before the person had done a single thing to earn or justify the sound. And your brain, this extraordinarily efficient machine built entirely around prioritizing meaning, holds on ruthlessly to things that mean something. A name, when you first hear it, means almost nothing at all. Think about the last moment in your life that genuinely mattered. A difficult conversation, a night you didn't expect to remember but did, a moment where something shifted in a relationship, in how you saw someone, in how you saw yourself. You remember things about it with surprising clarity, don't you? The specific feeling in the room, something someone said that landed deep in your chest, the way a silence felt before something happened. What you almost certainly do not remember is what was written on the agenda, what the sign outside said, the small administrative details surrounding the moment, because your brain made a decision, without asking you, about what was worth keeping. And it chose the experience, the feeling, the human stuff. It did not choose the printed text. Names are the printed text. Everything else about a person, the way they speak when they're being honest, the look on their face when they say something that surprises even themselves, the specific laugh you'd recognize across a crowded room, that's the experience. And your brain was there for all of it. Now here is where it gets personal. There is a specific type of person who forgets names more than anyone else. And it is not the arrogant one, not the distracted one, not the person who doesn't think other people are worth their full attention. It's the person who cares too much. Stay with me here. When you're meeting someone new, and you're the kind of person who genuinely worries about how you're coming across something very specific happens inside your head, even while you're looking at them, while you're nodding and responding and appearing completely present, there is an entire other conversation happening internally. Am I making enough eye contact right now? That was probably too much eye contact. Was that handshake too firm? Should I say something here or let them keep talking? I should say something. No, wait, don't interrupt. Did I already tell them this story? Do I seem nervous? Because I feel nervous. Can they tell I feel nervous? And into that relentless internal storm, their name enters for approximately 1 second. And then the commentary just bulldozes straight over it, buries it completely. This is documented. It has an actual name in psychology, the next in line effect. First identified in 1973 by psychologist Malcolm Brenner. He found that people anticipating their turn to speak showed dramatically reduced memory for what the person directly before them said. Not because they weren't listening, but because mentally they had already moved on, already composing, already preparing. And people who live with social anxiety, or even just a heightened self-awareness, are essentially stuck in that mode permanently. Never fully here, always half a step ahead into what comes next, which means the moment a name is offered to them, they're already somewhere else. Not because they don't care, because they care so much that their brain turned the whole interaction into something to manage. A performance to get right, and the name got lost in the performance. If you're recognizing yourself in any of this, I want you to hear something clearly. You do not have a memory problem. You have a preoccupation problem. And those are fundamentally different things. A memory problem means the storage system is broken. Something is wrong with the hardware. A preoccupation problem means the information never got a fair chance to be stored because you were too overwhelmed, too aware, too caught up in the moment to let one small piece of data land properly. One of those means something is wrong with you. The other just means you were human in a very human moment, and your brain did what it always does under pressure. It kept what felt important and let the rest go. Now I want to talk about the other side of this. The person whose name got forgotten, because their experience is real too, and it would be dishonest to skip past it. When someone forgets your name, especially someone you've met before, it lands like a quiet message. You didn't matter enough to stick. That's what it feels like. Even when you know logically it probably means nothing. Even when you tell yourself not to take it personally. The brain hears it anyway, files it somewhere uncomfortable, and I think that's worth acknowledging. Not to spiral into guilt, but to actually understand the full picture. Because here is what the person whose name got forgotten almost never gets to know. The person who forgot their name, they probably thought about the conversation later. They remember what you said about your sister. They remember the specific way you laughed at something. They remember that slightly unusual opinion you had, the one that didn't quite fit the expected answer that they were still thinking about on the drive home. They were there, fully there. They just weren't there for the label, because their brain was busy doing something else. It was storing the actual you, the impression of you, the feeling of what it was like to be in a conversation with you. And it decided without asking permission that that was worth more than the sound of your name, which is a strange kind of compliment, even if it never quite feels like one. Here's something that most people fundamentally misunderstand about memory. It is not a recording. We talk about it like it's a camera, like the brain just captures files and either a file is there or it isn't. But that is not how it works, not even close. Your brain stores impressions, emotions, patterns, the feeling of something far more reliably than the fact of it. And it prioritizes constantly, ruthlessly, completely without your conscious input. High emotion stored, surprise stored, something that connects to what you already know stored, something that contradicts your expectations stored. One arbitrary syllable handed to you at the exact moment you were busy trying to seem normal in front of a stranger, while simultaneously managing 6 other streams of social information. Good luck. That syllable had almost no chance. And the system isn't broken, it's doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's prioritizing the emotional landscape of the interaction. The nature of the person, the feeling of the room over an administrative detail. Your brain was reading the human. It just didn't bother filing the paperwork. Now, here's the part that genuinely surprises most people. The people who are best at remembering names are often not the warmest people in the room. They're the most systematic. They have a method, deliberate, almost mechanical in its consistency. They hear the name, they repeat it immediately. Great to meet you, Sarah. They attach it to a visual. They build an association. It works. It genuinely works. But look at what's actually happening there. They're running a process, treating the moment of meeting someone as a task to be executed correctly, which means part of their attention always is on the system, on the procedure, on getting it right. The people who are worst at remembering names, they never ran the system because they got completely absorbed in the actual human being standing in front of them. One approach builds a reliable file. The other builds something harder to name but more real, a genuine felt sense of another person, an impression that stays. And the one that gets labeled as rude, as careless, as not paying attention, is very often the one that was most present. Of course, none of this means you shouldn't try to improve. The techniques exist because they genuinely work. Repeat the name back when you hear it. Use it once or twice in the first few minutes. Connect it to a face you already know, or a word it sounds like, or an image that sticks in your mind. You're doing manually what your brain refused to do automatically. Building the bridge that wasn't there, giving the name somewhere to live. It takes conscious effort because it goes against the grain of how your memory naturally works. But it's learnable. It gets easier. And it matters not because forgetting names makes you a bad person, but because remembering them makes people feel genuinely seen. And that's worth something real. But the shame, that quiet, low-grade belief that runs underneath all of this for so many people, the belief that forgetting names means you don't really care, that you move through the world without truly registering people, that you are somehow less attentive, less present, less considerate than the people who always seem to remember. That part is wrong. And it deserves to be said clearly, because a lot of people carry this for years without ever questioning it, without ever stopping to ask whether it's actually true or whether they just absorbed it somewhere and never examined it. You are not absent. You are not dismissive. You are someone whose brain prioritizes experience over administration. Someone who gets so caught up in the actual texture of an interaction, the feeling of it, the human weight of it, that one small piece of data slips through. And the piece that slips through, the arbitrary sound someone's parents chose before that person had done a single thing worth remembering, that was always the least interesting thing about them. What you actually remember about the people in your life. The way a particular person phrases something when they're being completely honest. The specific laugh you'd recognize anywhere. The thing someone said to you once years ago that you still think about sometimes without meaning to, that's not a consolation prize. That's everything. You were paying attention the whole time, just not to the parts that fit neatly on a name tag. And honestly, neither does anyone worth remembering.